God, he's going to go around the inside. He's going to send it. He's taking the lead of the Canadian Grand Prix on the last lap. Matt Turner takes the win in a remarkable race. We have teammates coming together. How devastating!
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the iFormula League Season 3 F2 Championship here from Suzuka. Probably one of, well, my favourite circuits, that's definitely sure. And I'll tell you what, if the racing has been anything like it has been the past two races, this championship is going to be a good one. The race today, we're looking at around about 35 laps here around the Suzuka circuit, and obviously, as always, we've got a pit stop to worry about, potential tires and fuel to take, and well, as you see there, the driver standings and the team standings after round number 2. Cesar Cabral currently leading the way after an impressive home win last race. We're still very much in the air about that one. That was you'll excuse the pun, that was definitely one that was very good, very well driven from Cesar to get his car to the end, but obviously having a little bit of an issue early on did kind of set him up for that. So Carlos Catao in second, 1 point behind, and then Chris Byram sat there in third as well. So that would be your top three, all separated by 5 points here, which means that there is a potential, if Chris Byram wins this race, he will be leading the championship. So that's something to watch out for in this race. Got to make sure that we're watching out for Cesar Cabral and Carlos Catao as well. Ivan Bovekamp as well, Chris Byram's teammate, making sure that the Cooler Works guys are up there near the top in terms of team standing points. And Lewis Archer, new in last week, but had an impressive performance out there. So we're going to see if he can do well again today. Was looking at the practice times earlier, and it looked like the top guys were still very much there, with Lewis Colon as well looking up near the top. And I'll tell you what, this race, honestly, has the potential to be one of the best races that we have seen. I know I said it last week, but I'll say it again today. Let's get the standings off the screen. This is what we care about. Suzuka, obviously, 3.57 mile circuit. Not very much elevation change around here, but there are a couple of key corners to worry about, with the likes of, well, you know them, the famous corners, the S's. After turns 1 and turns 2, the double apex right-hander, you do have to worry about the S's. Very hard to follow each other through there, of course. And then after the S's, you do have the Degners, very, very good corners. Some might say an overtaking opportunity, but it is very brave to do so. Will feel like anyone who gets on the inside there will naturally just be able to take the corner and the lead. And then after the Degners, you've got to go under the bridge towards the hairpin. Very tight corner, very easy to lock the brakes into that corner, so we'll be trying to watch that on lap 1, see if everyone gets through cleanly. And once you make it out of the hairpin and you go all the way down towards Spoon Curve and the legendary 130R, flat out in these cars, absolutely no worries, even with the dirty air, and then the Casio Triangle will finish your lap. Only one DRS straight here on this circuit, which is the main straight as we're seeing on our screens now. But enough of that. Let's go and see if we can take a look at some of these times and see what people are doing. Lewis Colon currently setting the fastest times so far. Here he is on your screens, just going through the S's with a 1:44.68. So he's looking pretty fast. I was looking at his times in practice, and I must say they were looking very, very quick. as we now come through the Degners under the bridge towards the hairpin. Chris Byram currently setting the fastest lap as well, so he's just gone quicker with a 1:44.446. So about where I would expect these guys to be. Maybe somebody can try and knock on the doors of a 43, but it's going to be very tough to do so. I think a low 44 here is going to be the target to be safely within sort of the top 3, maybe the top 4 positions, as we see Lewis Colon currently coming through the spoon curve. Not sure if he's up on his time just yet. It looks like he's currently aborting his lap, getting some heat into those tires before going out and doing another lap. As we're seeing a couple people's times coming in now, with Corey Whiting there doing a 1:44.9, which will be 4/10 off of Chris Byram, and then also Hall there with a 1:45.4, and Cesar Cabral with a 1:45.1, trying to replicate his win at Interlagos last week, obviously. So it's going to be very interesting to see. We're going to take a look through the qualifying very closely here. The track conditions, relatively cold. They're not particularly hot just yet. They may start to get that way in the race, although I will say these cars aren't as sensitive to the weather as the Formula 1 cars, as we see quite often with the F1 drivers complaining about weather and saying that if the track's too hot, then the tires are like, they lose like half their life, as I was also finding out very quickly when I was talking with a couple of the other drivers, and it looks like these F2 cars seem to handle it a little bit better. Obviously not as much downforce, so it's a little bit easier for them. But we still have another 19 minutes left of quali, bringing that down to 18 minutes actually, as again Lewis Colon is not going any faster just yet. Corey Whiting did have a purple sector at one point, so we'll see if he can improve on his best lap as he comes across the line with his DRS closed, and he doesn't go much faster. Oh, yes, he does actually. He does go faster with a 1:44 flat. So, you know, when I was talking about potentially low 44s are where you're going to need to be, I'm thinking potentially we may see some people bashing into the 43s and really showing off just their level of skill here, as also Lewis Archer is currently on a flyer. Let's jump on board with him and see if he can go any quicker as he comes around the final corner for to set his first lap, and that's going to put him second place with a 1:44.370, so only 3/10 off. And one thing to note as well as we're watching these quali laps is that we may find that some of these guys actually end up having to turn off their DRS slightly early because of the way that the DRS works here. A lot of these drivers may not be braking into turn 1, and as such the DRS zone is actually coming on the apex almost of the corner. So you need to be careful when turning in, especially when you have your DRS open. Maybe not going to be such a big deal on the race, as we'll probably see a lot of drivers turning it off early before they turn in, just so they can be a little bit more aggressive, as Lewis Archer is currently improving on his time with a purple in the second and then a green in the third sector. But Chris Byram is also on a flyer here, a little bit further up ahead, with a purple in the third and then green on the fourth sectors, and Corey Whiting currently holding the fastest first sector as well. At some point I want to try and get some track maps sorted for you all so that we can take a look and see what these sectors are for iRacing, because they differ slightly from the real world. In the real world, normally you'd only be used to seeing 2 or 3 sectors depending on how short the circuit is. Occasionally you may see 4 or 5, potentially more on like a circuit like the Nordschleife, for example. As we're going to see Lewis come around here for taking the tightest line as he can up to the line. And is he going to improve? He does, but it's not enough for pole position just yet with a 1:44.1, and then Carlos Catal setting his fastest so far of a 44.6. which is 6/10 off at the moment. So Whiting's doing a very good job at setting the pace early on in the session, as I'm sure we will see quite a few drivers end up with going faster as the track gets more rubbered in. The tyres start to grip up a little bit more. Obviously unlimited tyre sets here, so it's you can just keep going at it until you get something that sticks. Although fuel is restricted 75% for the race, which does mean that we will need to pit for tyres and fuel, as I mentioned earlier. But looking down further through the grid, let's see if anyone else is improving. Carlos Gatau is through the second sector and third sector, currently up on his time slightly. Let's see if he can potentially cause an upset here and go into pole position. And if he can hold pole position, he can set himself up really nicely for the championship lead, as there is a little bit of traffic, so potentially he may have had to have aborted this lap, but he is still going to keep going down the back straight here before the legendary 130R flat out in these cars. And I'll tell you what, this corner is absolutely stunning. You just pin your foot to the floor, turn in, don't really think about it, and then brake very late as you dare for the Casio triangle. Try and clip the inside curbs very slightly, not too much because it will unsettle the car, but then take the shortest run out of it to the line as possible. And is he going to improve on his lap? He does, and does do a 43.799. So when I said we would be breaking into the 43s potentially, I was correct, but are we going to be able to go much faster? I don't think so. I think that will be the lap that puts Gatau out there as on pole, and anyone else is going to be trying to find where he found those 2/10 as well, and seeing if they can improve through any of the sectors. Through Sector 2 and Sector 3 is obviously where he looked quickest, but he is going to be backing off very slightly now, I think, on his laps. Not improving through the sectors, but he is still pushing a little bit as we go through Degner 2 and under the bridge towards the hairpin. You need to be very careful that you don't block the brakes here, as he does so very nicely, turns it into the apex, gets on power, being careful of the wheel spin as well. These cars having quite a bit of power underneath them, so no traction control to help you out as well, of course. So it's a very manual driving experience, aside from maybe the gears being sequential, obviously with the double clutch that we're so used to seeing now in a lot of these modern single-seater race cars. Differs from the way of old, but still very nice for the drivers to have to not worry about necessarily a clutch pedal, just having two pedals there in the box with them. As we go through 130R, Carlos Gatau still not improving by much, and he's possibly down here on his time, so he's probably not going to go any quicker than that 43.799, but he may end up actually being around a similar sort of pace and showing off the consistency here early on in qualifying. But just as I say that, he does indeed improve through the final sector and actually goes a little bit quicker, around about a 10th quicker there on his fastest lap. So it's going to be interesting to see if Corey Whiting can bounce back from that one. Lewis Archer and Chris Byram as well, seeing whether or not Lewis Colon could potentially improve with that gap now starting to build on top of everything else we're seeing. It's yeah, it is going to be interesting, this race. I feel like potentially we may see whoever gets through turn 1 cleanly obviously will have the S's all to themselves, as you'll probably be going single file through there. I can't imagine there's going to be too many brave moves, but if you manage to make it through the S's all in one piece, then the Degners approach you, and when you're going through the Degners, it's always a worry that the car behind may send it, but if they do, you sort of have to give up the position or risk contact with the corners being so quick these days in these modern Formula cars. And let's take a look and see if there's anyone else improving on their times, as we will jump on board with Alexander Carver-Robbins, see what he can do in that Auriga Motorsports car. Teammate to Carlos Gatau, let's see if he has a similar sort of pace. He's been waiting currently until the till quite late actually to get his laps in, so we'll see if that potentially pays off. As hold on 1 minute, because Carlos Ghitawa has just improved on his time yet again, and he does indeed go 1/10 quicker and does a 43.585. I think he's just trying to show off at this point. He's already got pole position, but he wants to secure it. He wants to make sure that that front row, that front position is all his as he heads into turn number 1. But it's certainly looking like that's going to be the case, as it doesn't look like Corey Whiting's going to improve on his lap just yet. And I'll tell you what, he does indeed, though. He does improve massively there to go 0.013 off of Carlos Ghitawa's time. That is very, very close. There was a couple of places where he did gain over Carlos on his fastest lap, but did end up losing them in a couple of other positions. Like, for example, Sector 5 and Sector 3, he was down as well as Sector 1. So, potential for Corey Whiting to find a little bit more time, as he was quicker in a couple of sectors. So, going to be interesting to see whether or not he can really push and really start to try and make himself known as a driver to compete with in this season. As we also have a couple of other drivers here. James Miller is joining us for the first time as currently a stand-in for Alex Gutnecht, who cannot make it with us today. And unfortunately we do see him spinning and reversing that car onto the grass, getting out of the way of anyone that's potentially behind him. But let's see who else is on fast laps at the moment. Fernando Matos, potentially, is on for an improvement to his lap. Let's see what he says as he comes around the final corner here. Not taking that short line that we see everyone else taking, so potentially a few tenths there to find. But other than that, he does not improve. So he's going to be looking to try and really see what he can do through the later stages of this qualifying session, as we have just 8 minutes to go here. And then once those 8 minutes are gone, it's going to be all over for qualifying. We'll be getting into a 5-minute warm-up, followed off by that race as well, which I will tell you what, looking at the top drivers so far, it's looking like it's going to be close between Ghitawa and Whiting, Byram and Archer, Cabral and Thomas, with Colon in there as well. And then a little bit of a gap before jumping in with some of the other drivers, as we see a couple of people struggling here in the hairpin. Their brake bias potentially a little bit too far to the back. So may have to sort that out in the pits, locking up and spinning the car around there through the hairpin. James Millett is actually on a flyer now, so let's jump on board with him and see what he can do as we go into the hairpin for the first time for him. Nice and easy on the power coming out. Now just going through the sweepers before the legendary spoon curve. Off camber corner here, so you want to make sure you are nice and tight to the inside for the second part. Otherwise you probably won't make the apex, as he does quite nicely there. Probably could have turned in a little bit earlier, but he does get a little bit of a snap there on the exit as well. So potential time to be found just by getting on the throttle a little bit smoother. Flat out through 130R, not much time to begin here, just try and turn the wheel as little as possible to avoid all that rolling resistance, breaking down for the Casio triangle. Taking quite a bit of curb there on the entry and the exit, and getting on the power, shifting up the gears, third, fourth, and then fifth with DRS shut and to the line, and he will set his first lap of a 45.935, so that's 2.3 tenths down. But potential for him to improve, obviously, with the slight little twitch coming out of Spoon Curve, as well as a couple of other corners there that he could maybe try and attack a little bit more. as all these drivers are so very much keen to try and improve wherever they can. But Chris Byram here coming through the Casio Triangle. Let's see if he can improve on his time with a purple sector there in Sector 4. Is it going to be enough for pole position though? Chris Byram comes across the line and it is a 43.939, so he does improve. He does go into the 43s, but it's not quite enough yet to put him in that top spot with Carlos Gatão. But he will be sitting behind him, obviously, as we go into the start. So any potential issues with Whiting, and we may see Byram trying to take an opportunity of that and send his car up the inside of turn number 1. Obviously, with the S's long approaching after the corner, you want to make sure you are getting that position as fast as possible. As we will see, it's not a very long run here from turn 2 to turn 3 and the start of the S's complex. The S's complex very much about setting up your car to deal with the next corner as they approach you so quickly that one slight miss of a line or not turning in enough and you'll end up finding that you are not in a good position to be able to take the next corners as nicely as you'd like to. And the Degner's very quick flicks here. Of the first one into the right, and then the second one again another tight right-hander. You'll see potentially some people as Byram seems to get a little bit stuck there in the fence and also loses a little bit of time with just hitting that wall, so he'll have to come back into the pits and go back out there, as we will jump on board with Cesar Cabral, as he has improved in every sector so far except for the one that we jump on board with. So let's see whether or not he can improve and go into pole position. Nice and easy through Spoon Curve, trying to make sure you don't spin that rear coming out of it. Down the straight now, flat out, not worrying about anything, just need to be to the right-hand side of the circuit before turning into 130R. Trying to use as little of the wheel as you possibly can, and then braking very, very, very late for the Casio Triangle, slowing the car down as much as you can to really open up the exit of the corner. And he isn't improving in the final 2 sectors, so it's going to be interesting to see as he takes a really short line, and it almost sounded like his car ran out of fuel there near the end, but does do a 43.982, so if he was potentially sputtering out of fuel there, he could have improved and maybe even put himself on the front row of the grid for the race. So that'll be interesting to see whether or not he has any issues with fuel management as well later on in the race, as it doesn't look like anyone else is up on their times for now. Looks like everyone is sort of just settling in and getting ready for the race. We may see some people start to try and use a little bit of time that they've got left in this session just to put on their race setups, do a lap or 2 in the race setup, remember how it feels, and then after that, who knows, we'll see what they do in the warm-up as well. A lot of drivers in the warm-up use it as a little bit of a break, just to stretch their legs and get themselves mentally prepared for the race as well. With the standing starts and everything, it's going to be very interesting to see if anyone decides to practice those before the race. Let's take a look at the weather and see whether or not the track has gotten a little bit hotter, as we will see that at the moment 12-mile-an-hour winds, so pretty high wind speeds, but probably not enough to affect these cars massively. And then your 74 degrees Fahrenheit air temp with a 79 degrees Fahrenheit track temp, so not particularly hot, definitely not what we saw at Brazil. So a couple of these drivers are definitely going to be a little bit happier, their car suiting colder conditions, I imagine, or the way that they drive at least. Obviously not having to worry about rain here in iRacing for now, although that is a feature that we may end up seeing actually during the length of this championship. But I'm going to shut up talking about the weather for a second, as Corey Whiting is currently on a faster lap. He has set purple in Sector 4 and Sector 5 as we go through the Casio Triangle. Bit of a blink there from him, just a bit of a disconnect, but he is back in, and let's see whether or not he can improve and go into pole position. And does he improve? And he does, to be 0.01 again quicker than Carlos Gatão, and Gatão has realized this and he is on an outlap. Is Gatão going to be able to make it to the Is he going to be able to make it to the line before the time expires? And I definitely think he will be able to from here. And he's going to go for one final lap, one glory run to put himself up on the top step for the grid. You know, let's commentate this lap as we jump on board with Carlos Ghosn going down the main straight. DRS closed as he takes the shortest run to the line. Normally you would see a lot of people on their flying laps trying to get past as quick as they can, but into turn 1, turning the steering wheel not that much because you've got to worry about that DRS flap reopening and causing some sort of aero balance change in the car as we go through the S's. Almost flat there through the first part, but slight lifts through the second and fourth gear, just making sure you can keep the car as nice and tight as possible. Just go into the right hand side of the circuit here to take this left-hander as flat as you can. Obviously it's not an easy corner to take flat in these cars, but the F1 you will see them take that flat every single time. And now he is going through the second. Degner's a little bit of a lock up there as he hits the inside curb, using the camber of the corner to really settle the car in and launch it out. There's also a trick that people will use at Bathurst as well, through a couple of the corners through Skyline and the Dipper, to really launch their car out in a good speed, because you gain so much traction out of those corners that it can end up with a really good time there. As we see him taking a nice line through Spoon. Let's see if he's improving. It doesn't look like he is. He's going to have to really send it through the Casio triangle if he wants to set the fastest lap of this session, as he comes through 130R now for the final time. 6th gear flat out, turning the steering wheel as little as possible through the Casio triangle. Brake as late as you dare, Carlos. Can you manage to get a very clean run? And it looks like he does. 2nd gear up into 3rd, 4th gear, cutting the inside as much as you can. DRS closed. Is he going to be able to improve on his time? And no, unfortunately not. 143.726 is the time there for him, so he will take that 143.58, and that will set your grid for the race. 14 drivers here for the race, and we are going to be looking at Corey Whiting setting the fastest lap in qualifying with a 43.574, Carlos Ghosn with a 43.58. And then in 3rd, we see Lewis Archer with a 43.85. Great lap from him to set himself above Chris Byram there with a 43.94, and then Cesar Cabral with a 43.98. So the top 5 into the 43s in quali, which is something that I deemed was quite difficult, but these drivers seem to know their way around this car a lot better than the commentators do. So it's always nice to see that these drivers are definitely keeping up. And yeah, we're gonna cut into the warm-up, take a look at the qualifying results for you, which will then move you onto the grid as well. Obviously no changes really for the race, as we will try and take a look at the results, although it doesn't look like it wants to show us. There we go. So the what you may see is Oyvind Breivik there as listed as a driver, but he is not in the server. He joined by accident and quickly left. So there is 14 drivers indeed in this race. We can try and ignore Breivik where possible. But Corey Whiting does set the fastest lap in qualifying with that 43.57, as I mentioned, with Carlos Ghosn with a 43.58. Lewis Archer behind him with a 143.6. Nope, 7. I cannot remember the times, but the gaps are on the screen for you anyway. 2 tenths off for Lewis Archer from Corey Whiting. The gaps there are all between themselves and the pole position man, so you know, we're not seeing Fernando Mateos 2.6 seconds off James Miller. That would be 2.6 seconds off Corey Whiting. So again, it looks pretty close, at least for the top 8, with Carlton Hall just a little bit further back than he would like to be from Ronald Mathau. But I'm sure, you know, qualifying pace doesn't say everything. You're definitely needing to look at also what they can do in the race. Obviously, consistency is going to be a big thing with so many laps around here, and lots of places to potentially have an incident as well. So obviously there are a lot of safety car opportunities going into the hairpin on lap 1. Obviously is going to be for these drivers, hopefully they're all in single file by the time they get there, and using their head to try and make it through nice and clean, not trying to send any moves. But it is wide enough to go side by side. We have seen it a few times in F1, obviously. A couple drivers trying to make the other driver ahead a little bit uncomfortable by just peeking ahead. But yeah, we'll see what happens throughout the race as we do take a look at that Ferris wheel. We always love that. Lights up during the night as well, which is always lovely to see in the endurance races around Suzuka. Ooh. If you do want to get involved as well, people who are watching along, come join us. www.iFormulaLeague.com has all the information already for you, as we will gladly accept you within our lovely community that we've got here. We've got Discord as well if you want to get in touch and you know, just ask us questions, get involved in the community here. Lovely lot of drivers we have around. Any questions as well that you have setup wise, a lot of these drivers are very helpful and will try and help you where possible. It's definitely a lovely place to be. But iFormula League is where you find all of the information and can keep up with everything going on iFormula League related. But obviously tomorrow we're looking at the F3 and F1 as well around Suzuka. One of which starting earlier in the day than this. The F1 will be starting around the same sort of time as this stream did, over on a different channel, as the timing screens are bugging a little bit here. See if we can fix that. They always seem to be messing around a little bit in the warm-up, but not long to go before the race, so we'll see what happens. And see if we can have any exciting action again. I'll tell you what, I'm trying to save my voice because I know that these guys are going to be a bit crazy. If it's anything like Barcelona was, if it was anything like Interlagos was, there is going to be some sort of drama, there's going to be some sort of insane action that's going to have these guys just battling their hearts out for the entire couple of laps that we have here. And you know, the Japanese Grand Prix circuit always seems to deliver on its racecraft. Definitely one that has a lot of overtaking opportunities if you're brave enough, especially going into 130R as well is also an option. Again, I wouldn't recommend it, but it is an option. We have seen people go for moves there. As we will take a look at the grid, obviously, for the race, and we will take a look, being on board with a couple of drivers here. But as I say, the race itself, 33 laps here, and I am very excited for this one. And just been an update as well. On the fast repair situation, a lot of drivers were using throughout. We will not be seeing a fast repair if you cannot get back to the pits. This is a rule change that we made for the season, so you have to be careful if you have any mistakes. But here we are, getting ready for the race, as both camp is starting from the pits, and here we go, 5 red lights, lap 1 of 34, and they're off, with Corey Whiting getting a very good start off the jump there with, who's that? Lewis Archer getting an incredible start as well, trying to get around the back of Carlos Catau, and oh no, Carlos Catau has ended up spinning, and he's collected a couple of other drivers, and there's been a huge collision through turn 2. There's been an absolute chaos through turn 2 as we see Ronald Matheau as well trying to get back on track. There's been a couple of other drivers all involved. There's so many drivers caught in that collision, and that's going to cause Corey Whiting to be taking the lead with Lewis Archer behind and James Malaire gaining 9 positions off that chaos. And oh no, that was absolutely devastating through turn number 2. So many cars involved within that incident of Carlos Catal spinning there and collecting so many other drivers all through turn number 2, and that has of course caused a safety car, so we will see whether or not they can catch up to the safety car before anything else happens. And remember, with the safety car, it does mean you do have no fast repairs. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not these drivers continue on. Sorry, when I say fast repairs, I mean pits for the first lap. So it's going to be interesting to see when these drivers decide to pit. Obviously, some of them now carrying a little bit of damage after that first corner incident. But let's take a little jump back, see if we can figure out what happened there with a couple of other drivers. So let's jump on board with Carlos Catal as he comes through and unfortunately just loses the rear through the second part of the corner, and then there's just absolute chaos there with a couple of other drivers just absolutely trying to floor it through the chaos, and that's not something we're really going to want to be seeing from a lot of these drivers. But let's see what happened with Cesar Cabral here, as he seems to just get involved and unfortunately tag a couple of other drivers and have to make a voiding action. And oof, it's all a little bit of carnage here, as Chris Byram also got tagged from behind, and he got sent off as well and into the air. He's probably now going to have to use his fast repair if he can get back to the pit lane. Let's see what happened with Sean Gerd as he sees the chaos and tries to take avoiding action, but unfortunately he seems to not be able to get involved too much, so he's probably not going to be taking much damage there, if any at all. And nicely back on track as well for him, being nice and safe there. But let's see what happened to Carlton Hall as well, as he tried to take avoiding action, and oh no, the spins from the 3 cars ahead of him meant that he had nowhere to go and just had to sort of just try and slow down as much as possible before getting back on track. And there's a couple of other drivers involved here as well. Alexander Carver-Robbins trying to avoid the chaos, but getting collected there by, I think that was Lewis Archer, as Fernando Matos as well, coming round, trying to be nice and steady. And he seemed to avoid the chaos quite nicely. But you see how many drivers were involved in that, as there was obviously a lot of incidents here, and here this might be a better angle of being able to see what happened. Look ahead there, seems to be a driver coming off, and then so many cars collecting each other, as it looks like Ronald Mathau did get collected there by, I think that would be Zach Pimenta. Have a look at what he did into turn number 2, trying to get involved, and just unfortunately understeer kicking in, and he wasn't able to really go much further there. But that is unfortunately an incident that they're going to have, as Lewis Colon also had another incident here apparently with a crash with another driver, it looks like, as that seems to be, nope, just a little bit of a slowdown there, as a couple of drivers are definitely crabbing and trying to make their way back to the pits. I think that would be Chris Byram here, who's unfortunately got himself all stuck, as we see there with the damage. That is definitely not the angle you want your wheel to be at. But as I said before, there was a lot of chaos going on, and it's only lap 1. Already have a safety car here on lap 1. We were also trying to look at ways we can improve the safety car, potentially have it run a little bit quicker, because these Formula cars do need a lot more speed for their tyres to warm up, as Chris Byram is now in the pits to try and repair his damage. So he'll get a fast repair and get back out there. So he probably shouldn't be in the pit lane for too long. Ivan Bovkamp, also another one who did go into the pit lane as well. I'll tell you what, the amount of turn 1 incidents we've seen is a little bit interesting, I must admit. Hopefully the drivers throughout the league can get through nice and clean in a couple of races time. As Chris Byram has now left the pits, so he won't be a lap down, but he'll be racing to catch up, obviously, with there being 2 to go on the safety car. So going underway here probably on lap 4 rather than lap 1. As we do see a couple of other drivers with a little bit of bent wings, so they may potentially come in and do an early pit stop to repair the car, or they may just end up sticking with it, seeing what they can do. And if they stick with it and see what they can do, then they're going to be potentially suffering with a little bit of understeer there with the front damage on the front wings. Will depend on how that affects the aero balance of the car, obviously. But always exciting, these races. Maybe for the wrong reasons. But it does obviously mean that we do get a little bit more downtime to try and relax. A little bit more time off the clock there up the top. So let's see if anyone does jump into the pit lane. As it looks like Carlos Catao is jumping into the pits. Cesar Cabral, Fernando Matos, Alexander Carver-Robbins, Ronald Mathau, Zach Pimenta, Daniel Thomas as well, all jumping into the pit lane. So all those drivers will end up losing a few positions. But not as much as they would otherwise under normal green flag conditions. So they should be back there afterwards. And then that is Zach Pimenta just using his fast repair and coming back out. Jumping a couple of the guys. I think that's what we'll see a lot of these drivers doing. Is just using their fast repair to come out of the pits. And we will see where everyone lines back up after the race. After everyone has been and gone. Chris Byram back in the race, obviously, after using that fast repair. Just going to tuck in there behind Daniel Thomas and Cesar Cabral. 2 drivers to watch for. Obviously, Chris Byram and Cesar are very, very quick drivers in their own right. And Carlos Catao also at the back. So the top three guys fighting for the championship, all at the back of the grid now. I'm going to see whether or not they can make their way through the grid, which may mean that we may get a new championship, or we may get a new winner, but it may not upset the championship as much as people might think. Will depend on where, obviously, Cabral, Byram, and Catao finish. With Cabral and Catao having just 1 point difference between them, it will be whoever finishes ahead will be ahead of the other in the championship. So only 1 point difference makes things spicy, but Chris Byram's obviously only 5 points behind, so if he manages to get a good run here and overtake a couple of these drivers like Daniel Thomas, like Fernando Matos, like Alexander Carver-Robbins as well, if he manages to overtake a couple of those drivers on the restart, then he could potentially set himself up to follow Cesar Cabral and maybe take away his chances of a win. But I do think the safety car lights are out, so we will be going this time round, as a couple of the drivers are now just trying to warm up their tyres. Everyone is in their positions, as Daniel Thomas seemed to lag a little bit there and has disconnected from the server, I think. So potentially some lag issues for him. Nope, he is back. Got a little bit worried there that we would have a Carlos Catao situation from the first from the first round. But Catao, last to first challenge, is what he's going to be saying to himself. Again, seems to love these comeback drives. Let's see if he can not finish in second after a comeback drive this time, though. That seems to be the way that things have gone so far at Brazil, obviously. Not that much of a comeback drive, admittedly, compared to Barcelona, but was still a very good drive nonetheless from him. He is down 13 positions, so he's got a long way to go to catch up to the guys at the top. As at the moment, our biggest gainers so far from the incidents, we're looking at James Miller, the stand-in, currently in P3, gaining 9 positions off the start, and then Ivan Bothkamp, currently P6. He gained 9 positions as well off the start, with all of the incidents involved and all of the people involved, 3 of which are your top contenders for the championship. As we do go down this long back straight before going to 130R, safety car will pull in, and it will be up to Corey Whiting to see what he can do off the start here. As we will, let's watch back from him and see if we can see if everyone gets through cleanly. Obviously, he is going to be the one that leads us away on lap number 1 as we go through 130R. Let's see where that pace car is. He's given it a bit of a wide berth, just so he can go when he wants to. You've got to wait before the safety car does cross the line, obviously, before you can put your foot down. But it is up to you when you go once the safety car has pulled in. So everyone's going to start getting really close to each other as we take a look at that beautiful chrome livery there. And he does indeed go and catches Lewis Archer absolutely napping there off the start. As we take a look back, James Miller also getting away from Sean Gerd, and Ivan Bothkamp's going to look for a move potentially into turn 1, and it looks like there's been a couple of other people who have all had some sort of issues as well, of being quite a bit further back. I don't know what happened there, with Colton Hall having a bit of an issue, and he's now in the pits with Lewis Colon as well, so I'm not sure what happened there, but there seem to be quite a few issues between a lot of these drivers, as we will jump on board to Lewis Archer and seeing whether or not he can catch on top of Corey Whiting. At the moment, it looks like closest battle on track is going to be here between Daniel Thomas and Alexander Carver-Robbins, as Thomas is trying to look through the Degners. Is he going to be able to make a move into Degner 1? It doesn't look like it, so he's going to try and set himself up into Degner 2, and he does go up the inside after a lock-up from Alexander Carver-Robbins, and does manage to make that move relatively unscathed, as Chris Byram has already made up a couple of positions here as well. Cesar Cabral making up a load of positions off the start as well, so Cesar Cabral is making the most of the safety car restart and is now trying to chase down Sean Gerd, as there seems to be a 5-second gap between Sean Gerd and Cesar Cabral, so not ideal off a safety car restart. But Chris Byram's now trying to look for any move he can on Fernando Matos, and it looks like the exit of Spoon Curve there for Matos is not what he wanted. And as such, Chris Byram's going to look towards the inside of 130R. Is he brave enough to do it? No, he does indeed come out, and Fernando Matos is going to be able to take that position. But Chris Byram's going to try and look down the inside and going through the start here into turn number 1. As Zach Pimenta's also had a little bit of an incident there by himself as well, as it does look like Chris Byram is in the slipstream, is going to be able to get past Fernando Matos as quickly as possible going into turn number 1. Makes it rather easily up the inside there into turn number 2 as well, trying to set himself up for the S's in the dirty air of Alexander Carver-Robbins, as well as Corey Whiting and Lewis Archer are seeming to be storming away from the field, currently with James Miller behind, but Lewis trying to look to see if he can make any moves on Corey Whiting for the lead of this race in that GTR Evolution car. And at the moment, it doesn't look like he's finding too many places to pass. But going into the hairpin, he's going to take a wider line, which will give him a slightly later apex. Might mean he can get on the throttle a little bit earlier, which might mean he'll have the run into spoon curve. And if you get the inside of spoon curve, it's job done. And Corey Whiting's probably going to know this and try and defend the inside line. And it doesn't look like he does, but Lewis doesn't try to send it just yet. He's going to wait. He's going to bide his time because he might try and use DRS on this lap to see whether or not he can get past into turn number 1 as going now down the back straight into turn number 1. Is he going to be able to make any moves? Doesn't look like it just yet. It looks like he is just keeping as close as he can. Is he going to be able to look for a move into the Casio triangle? He thought about it, but nothing yet. He is going to relax a little bit and just let it slide for now and get a really good exit. Look for that rear wing. See if it changes. See if it closes up. It doesn't look like it does just yet, as it looks like there's still a gap there, which allows him to just get the slipstream so far. And not quite close enough into turn number 1 to take a move on Whiting there. And looks like he went a little bit deep, which is going to give Whiting a chance to breathe. As we will jump on board with Alexander Carver-Robbins as he's trying to defend from Chris Byram, who just gets it up the inside there, and that was Carlos Gatao getting past Fernando Matos as well. So Carlos is chasing up to now his teammate Alexander Carver-Robbins, who I'm pretty sure Alex is going to have to maybe just give way a little bit when he when his teammate Carlos catches up to cause no disputes there between them. As there seemed to be another on-track overtake there. That was between Cesar Cabral and Sean Gerd. So Cesar now back up into 5th place in this race. And he has got the pace so far. And he is looking very quick. Currently the fastest lap of the race with a 1:46.82. As I'm going to quickly jump back on board with this battle between Corey Whiting and Lewis Archer. Corey taking a little bit of liberties there on track limits, but all within the white lines, so he will be absolutely fine there. As it doesn't look like Lewis is going to be close enough to make any moves into turn 1. Obviously going to follow nice and closely through 130R. Again, flat out, nice and easy. But Corey Whiting may have the chance to use DRS to defend here from Lewis Archer. Obviously, DRS in this series is limited by uses, not by whether you are 1 second on ahead of the car in front. So we may end up seeing Whiting try and use the DRS to defend if he spots that rear wing close. That's what he may potentially do. And just as I say that, James Miller sets the fastest lap of the race. So he's looking to try and catch up to the top 3 and get himself involved, but currently 2.2 seconds back, so he's not going to have too much of an issue just yet. As we'll jump now on board with Chris Byram, Daniel Thomas as well battling there, as Byram takes a look up the inside but doesn't send it just yet. Going through the S's, obviously going to have a little bit of dirty air, as we will jump on board with Chris Byram and see if he can follow nicely through the S's. Obviously dirty air causing a little bit of issues on the car. As you see, he's trying to turn and the car's not really responding. It's going to cause quite a bit of understeer as the air just sort of washes over the front rather than has that clean, nice impact that we're used to. But those two drivers are catching up to the guy in front, who is Sean Gerd, so potentially an issue for 2 moves to be on here. And for Sean Gerd, he's going to have to be looking in his mirrors and taking a look at these drivers, knowing that they're going to be slightly quicker than him with how fast they're catching up. And oh my goodness, Chris Byram there potentially getting one up the inside as Daniel Thomas went really late into the braking. But Daniel Thomas not able to lose a position just yet. He is just trying to put as much pressure on the driver in front as he can, and really seems to be overdriving that car almost, but really trying as much as he can to get on the back of Sean Gerd and potentially force an overtake. And I do believe we just missed the overtake there between Archer and Whiting, so we may have to go and take a look at that one again in a second. But I want to jump on board here with Archer as he, oh goodness, that is Daniel Thomas hitting the back of Sean Gerd, and then Chris Byram's going to look to try and go up the inside, which will turn to the outside for the next corner, and it doesn't look like It doesn't look like Chris was able to get the move done, but Daniel Thomas did end up causing a collision there with Sean Gurdon. It looks like Chris Byram's just going to use that DRS, get past as nice and as possible, and take up that 6th position. He needs to be careful though of Daniel Thomas trying to get back at him, but it doesn't look like he's going to be pressured too much, as Alexander Carver-Robbins is also going to have a little bit of a look as well, as Sean Gurd has entered the pit lane as well, due to that contact between Daniel Thomas and himself. So Chris Byram's now going to try and head off into the sunset with Cesar Cabral leading the charge, as it were, as we'll now jump on board with Lewis Archer, who has built off a gap to Corey Whiting already. So that seemed to be a move that led itself quite nicely. So here we are, looking on board with Lewis Archer, going up the inside of the Casio Triangle. Nice and easy, giving him the space, giving him the respect and the racing room, and it looks like Corey Whiting didn't really have anything left to defend on that move. So that was a nice move there for Lewis Archer to take the lead, and as you see, the gap extended massively onto the straight, as we will jump now back on board with Corey Whiting to see what that gap's looking like. As I said, is extending slowly but surely, but here's a gap that isn't, with Alexander Carver-Robbins in the draft of Daniel Thomas. Is he going to be able to make a look into potentially the Casio Triangle, as we saw, and he's going to look for it up the inside. Alexander Carver-Robbins on Daniel Thomas, and he does take that tight line, giving the racing room, but Daniel Thomas is trying to fight back. Alexander Carver-Robbins will have the inside line, and let's get on board with TV cam so we can try and see as they're darting around all over the place. 3 drivers here, Carlos Catal, Alexander Carver-Robbins, and Daniel Thomas, all looking for the same piece of tarmac as they're going to try and make it 3 wide into the first corner. But thankfully, Carlos Catal did actually warn his teammate of what was going on there, because that could have ended in disaster. But Carlos Catal does make it through behind Alexander Carver-Robbins, so I'm sure Carlos is now going to be attacking Daniel Thomas as much as he can. And oh no! Carver-Robbins has had an incident, and he's gone off into the wall, potentially with damage. But he's going to get back on track nice and easy. But Carlos Catal, let's get on board with this battle between himself and Daniel Thomas. Is anything going to happen between these 2 drivers? We have noticed, obviously, with that mistake from Alexander Carver-Robbins, that it did let through Carlos Catal. And Daniel Thomas is now going to be looking at the guy second in the championship on the back of him. And he's going to be probably nervous looking in his mirrors to see whether or not there's potentially any moves to be made. He's going to try and analyze Carlos a little bit and see where he's quicker, see where he needs to not defend and focus on, and instead just drive his race. Obviously, Carlos is going to be doing the same thing, but he's going to be seeing where he's stronger to try and make a move on Daniel Thomas. As we will jump on board with Ivan Bovkamp, as Cesar Cabral has managed to catch up to Ivan rather quickly, honestly, with 10 laps gone of this 34-lap race. And this race has been going by very, very quickly here. But Ivan Bovkamp currently up 11 positions, but potentially only 10 if Cesar Cabral tries to make this move up the inside. And it looks like he's just going to try and use Slipstream for now, as it looks like that rear wing stayed rather open there. But not able to really get close enough for any mistakes, as Carlos Catal is also going to try and make a move, as we see moves being made everywhere right now, with Fernando Matos trying to make a move on Ronald Mathot, but not able to get anything done just yet into turn number 1. As I mentioned before, that turn number 1, a key place for these drivers to try and make moves on each other. With the slipstream you get out of the Casio Triangle, if you're following closely, you just need to pop that DRS and you're probably going to find yourself nicely up the inside with slipstream as well. It's going to prove very difficult with the for the driver in front to really defend, even if they use DRS themselves. And as I mentioned, the DRS not just for the person defending, but also for the guy sorry, not for the guy attacking, but also for the person defending, as a tool to use to avoid slipstream. And what you may find is a lot of these drivers actually looking at the car in front and potentially looking to see when the car in front uses DRS and not using it themselves, and actually holding off and then attacking themselves when they know that the DRS can't be used to defend, as we will look for Carlos Quital to see whether or not he can get close enough to make a move into the Casio triangle, but he's going to do it earlier than that. They're going to go side by side through 130R, and both drivers managing to make that somehow work, as it looks like Carlos Quital is going to go up the inside and manage to make that move, with Daniel Thomas unable to really answer back after going wide there through 130R. So that's something that's that was a move, definitely, that Carlos Quital had planned coming out of Spoon Curve. Obviously close enough to make it work, so that's what he did, as we will now jump on board with Ivan Bovkamp, who is currently being hunted down by Cesar Cabral, but not quite close enough to make any moves just yet. So we'll see if he can do anything to improve his positions in the race. So far, it doesn't look like there is any battles super close, as Daniel Thomas is still going to keep within sort of that 0.5 of a second range of Carlos Quital, but we know Carlos Quital is a quick driver, and we know how fast he can be. So we're going to look to see whether or not he can keep pushing, set these faster laps. Obviously now out of the back of Daniel Thomas's draft, so he can use the clean air and potentially drag Daniel Thomas a little bit further up the grid as well. If Daniel Thomas can keep within range, obviously he can use the slipstream and work together almost to try and push themselves up to the likes of Chris Byram and Cesar Cabral. Although it is going to be a tall order, with Carlos Quital 5 seconds behind Chris Byram, and then Chris Byram in a further 5 seconds behind Cesar Cabral as well, as we do look at the two of them there trying to just currently focusing on their own race, as Corey Whiting does pit now for the first time, as Daniel Thomas is going to try and make a move around the outside there of the Casio triangle, and that is not the way you do it, going straight over and probably getting an iRacing slowdown penalty for that as well. So we'll see him dropping further back from Carlos Quital, which is going to mean Carlos has a little bit more clean air available to him and doesn't have to worry about pressure from behind, as Corey Whiting will exit out in 8th position, potentially battling with this battle between Ronald Mathot and Fernando Matos as well. Potentially Ronald's going to look at that and try to fight Corey Whiting ahead of him, and I do wonder whether or not James Miller and Lewis Archer will look at the fact that Whiting has pit, see where Whiting has come out, and potentially pit on the same lap. Obviously we are not even halfway through this race yet. We'd be looking at the halfway point being around 17 laps into this race, so a little bit earlier than you'd expect, but maybe Whiting's trying an alternate strategy and pitting early and getting himself some clean air to try and really push and pressure Archer into doing some very consistent and fast laps. But it does look like at the moment Archer's going to be running away with it unless someone can really catch up, or there is another incident, which of course we never hope happens. As it does look like currently a lot of these drivers are sort of in their own bubbles at the moment. It doesn't look like anyone is super close to one another, but Cesar Cabral is slowly catching Ivan Bovkamp there, sort of within that 1 second range. Hopefully Cesar can really start to push himself and make a move on Bovkamp. Obviously it would be a very good move if he makes it up into 3rd place. That would definitely bring him up into the lead of the championship. So it's going to be interesting to see how his strategy plays out. Obviously with the early pit stop, are we going to see another situation like Brazil where the early pit stop has actually favoured the drivers? I think potentially we may see that happen, as almost every driver has done their pit stop now except for Lewis Archer and James Miller. So with every driver having done their pit stop, what that's going to mean is that we have we only have 2 drivers, and that'll be why we see the gap so big, is because a lot of these drivers have obviously done their pits. And it's going to mean that we will see Lewis Archer and James Miller potentially drop spots through their pit stop and potentially give Ivan Bovkamp the lead of this race, with Cesar Cabral, Chris Byram and Carlos Quital also getting involved for that 2nd and 3rd position spots. As we do see a move there being made by Fernando Matos on Monod Mathau. Doesn't look like there was any sort of issues there. As it looks like, oh, was that Daniel Thomas who's had an incident? Let's go on board with him as he goes into the hairpin. Watch that inside tyre, see if he potentially pushes a little bit too hard, and he does. Gets on the throttle a little bit too early, and he does hit that inside wall. Was there any contact there between himself and anyone else? Doesn't look like it, so he managed to just avoid everyone else, but potentially a bit of front wing damage for Daniel Thomas, and a couple of lost positions as well, so not going to be a good thing for him, seeing as he wanted to fight with the guys at the top. That does put him now down into 11th, as we will rejoin this battle here with Ivan Bothkamp and Cesar Cabral. Cesar a little bit closer this lap as we go through the S's. And obviously no move really to be made through the S's. You sort of just have to follow the car behind and hope that nothing happens with the car in front. Obviously with the dirty air, makes it very difficult to really get into the back of the driver in front and make a move out of the S's and into the Degners. But Cesar Cabral knows this. He's just going to be relaxing, I think, for a little while. Just using Ivan Bothkamp more as just a way to potentially save on fuel, as we see one of them locking up there into the hairpin. I think both drivers locking up, actually, as we saw Cesar Cabral's tyre stop spinning there on the inside left. Very easy tyre to lock up, as obviously you're going to be turning in usually quite late, but your braking isn't really in a straight line for the hairpin. And the off-camber corners of Spoon, as I mentioned before, you want to try and be as close to the inside as possible. It'll give you the best run out of the corner to fight for any positions of drivers who didn't get that inside line. And the pace difference between the inside line and the outside line of Spoon Curve is something that is... you wouldn't think is that much, but when you actually race this circuit and you watch these guys, if you look at the time difference between when they get Spoon right and when they get Spoon wrong, you're looking at almost 2/10, 3/10 of a second difference. So that is obviously something that a lot of these drivers are going to try and minimize, as that time loss is going to be an issue. As Cesar Cabral almost made the move there on Ivan Bothkamp, but wasn't quite close enough, and then Ivan Bothkamp seemed to be a little slow coming out of the second part of the double right-hander there. It does dip downhill slightly, so braking a little bit later than you normally would be able to. Sorry, a little bit earlier you'd normally be able to, because the car will be accelerating going downhill. And it does also camber slightly. Not that noticeable when you're actually driving, but definitely these TV cams highlight just the camber of this circuit and the way that this circuit has been built sort of into the terrain around it, rather than like as a multi-purpose sort of structure like we would see in, say, for example, Dubai or Abu Dhabi. Their circuit obviously being quite purpose-built, so we don't really see any cambers that they haven't added themselves. But another good run through Spoon, it looks like, for Ivan Bothkamp. So Cesar again losing a bit of time there, going wide through Spoon, but he is on for a fastest lap of the race if he keeps this up. Going fastest through Sector 4, but it does look like he did lose up a little bit too much time through Sector 5, so he may not be able to get the fastest lap of the race, but he will be able to push for just pressure more than anything on Ivan Bothkamp. As we will see, who's that? Alexander Carver-Robbins, unfortunately off track and hard into the wall there, losing his front wing. So if he can get back, that is at Spoon Curve. If he can get back to the pits, he may be able to repair his car, but he's going to lose out on quite a few positions there and may end up actually having to retire from the race if the damage is too bad. That's unfortunate. I want to try and see what happened there with him. Is this what happened as we go up the hill into the hairpin? No, this was on another lap, it seems like, as he did get a little bit too happy on the throttle there, which caused a little bit of a spin. But let's see if we can figure out what happened here as Alexander went off track. Going into Spoon Curve there, just sending it really way fast in, and forgetting that you may need to brake a little bit for spoon curve. Otherwise, you will lose the rear of the car, as the car doesn't really have that much grip through spoon with the camber of the corner. But that does mean Alexander Carver-Robbins is now in the pit lane, and he is going to try and repair that car. As we see Ronald Mathau and is that Fernando Matos, I think, having an incident there and locking up potentially on the AstroTurf going into Degner 2 is very much a place for it, but that means he has now brought some a bit of marbles back onto the track. So Fernando Matos having a little bit of an incident, which will mean Ronald Mathot is now up into P8 with Corey Whiting P7 there. Obviously has pit, so it'll be interesting to see whether or not or when Lewis Archer pits as well. Obviously building quite a bit of a gap here to Corey Whiting. It is now 32 seconds, which is enough to get out ahead of Corey Whiting if he so wished to pit. But potentially, if the pace is good, he's going to be looking to try and make even more moves. It doesn't look like he will just yet. It looks like he's just going to keep going on. He's not at risk of losing many positions if he pits, so he'll just see if he can improve around the guys ahead of him. As it looks like that seems to be what a lot of these drivers are doing now, is just sort of settling into their own rhythm. No one really super close, except for Daniel Thomas and Ronald Mathot as well. Although Ronald has seemed to avoid the pressure there from Daniel Thomas. As it looks like Daniel Thomas is having a few connection issues here as well, so potentially something for him to have to look at after the race as well, to make sure that he's safe with some other drivers. But in terms of battles on track, it looks like our closest is still between Cesar Cabral and Ivan Bovkamp, sort of around that 1 second window, and it seems like every time I go through Spoon Curve with these two drivers, Cesar Cabral manages to lose a little bit of time there. And if we jump on board with Ivan Bovkamp, we may be able to see who is that. I believe that is Alexander Carver-Robbins, potentially. Who is ahead. Or potentially James Miller. Indeed it is. It is James Miller. So the Lumos E-Motorsports driver of James Miller may actually be able to, or has actually been caught up by Ivan Bovkamp and Cesar Cabral, with Bovkamp obviously having a team connection with Chris Byram, who's currently third in the championship. So Ivan Bovkamp may potentially want to take that position from James Miller and maybe even hold James Miller and Cesar Cabral up in a way that allows Chris Byram to maybe come through and take the championship lead if he manages to win this race. But it does look like currently the guy who's going to win this race looks to be Lewis Archer, with no sort of competition out there, honestly. He's since overtaking Cesar Cabral, he doesn't seem to have had any sort of issues. Sorry, not Cesar Cabral, Corey Whiting. Since then, he hasn't really had any pressure from ahead or behind, so he can just sort of do his thing, and he's been doing very consistent laps, sort of in that 1 minute 45 range, between low and sort of mid to high 45s. Something you want to do when you're by yourself is just to set a lap target. Potentially use that lap target as a way to keep the pressure on, but also be aware that your tyres aren't going to wear too much if you manage to use them. But we will be getting a three-way battle now here between Cesar Cabral, Ivan Bovkamp, and James Miller, as no driver seems to be using their DRS just yet. Although I say that, it does look like Ivan Bovkamp was trying it, as we see that rear wing flick up a little bit as he goes into turn number 1. Still trying to get a little bit closer towards James Miller, and we're going to go through the S's now. And that dirty air causing again an issue of not being able to get close enough here around Suzuka So all these drivers struggling to really keep close and really keep the cars tight and bunched up, which means that you're going to have a lot of issues trying to make passes, obviously. Spoon Curve seems to be one of the places that you can do it, but you're going to need to make sure you get a good run out of it. Maybe DRS down the back straight to see if you can make the move into 130R or into the Casio triangle using the slipstream all the way down that back straight. So let's see if Ivan can get a good run here through the Spoon Curve. You go through the first part of Spoon Curve, second part trying to get as nice to the inside as he possibly can. So it looks like he did get a pretty good run there, but it looks like so did James Miller. So unless Ivan can really put pressure on him with the slipstream, it looks like we're going to see yet another lap of these drivers not really being close enough to make any moves. But Ivan Bothkamp now within that sort of half a second range as we break into the Casio triangle. And Ivan Bothkamp needs to be aware that potentially James Miller hasn't pit yet. So if he wants to play that game, he can just relax a little bit. Say that, hey, the driver ahead of me hasn't pit. I don't need to pit again. I can just control this race from where I am. I don't need to be worried about the car ahead. So I'm just going to race my race and just seeing what happens. As we also look at Cesar Cabral trying to maybe do the same thing. May have not realized that Ivan Bothkamp has indeed pitted. And obviously, actually saying that, I believe Ivan Bothkamp may have started from the pit lane in this race due to some sort of penalty issues here in the iFormula League. And if that's the case, then Ivan Bothkamp will need to pit again. And Cesar Cabral will also be wary of that fact that if the drivers ahead don't need to pit, that will mean your top three will be Cesar Cabral, Chris Byram, and Carlos Catal. Top three of the championship standings, Cesar Cabral, Carlos Catal, and Chris Byram. So depending on how the race finishes, oh no, there seems to be an issue there with James Miller as he comes back onto the track and almost takes out Ivan Bothkamp, which is going to cause a massive issue for both drivers, which means that Cesar Cabral is now going to be second in this race, and that's going to mean he's going to want to put pressure on the leader so far, Lewis Archer, who has had an absolutely untroubled race so far. 45.1 fastest lap of the race for him, so he's probably going to be pushing and pitting on this lap with only 13 laps to go, as Ivan Bothkamp does now dive into the pit lane for his pit stop after that incident, potentially with James Miller, causing him to have to slow down a little bit, so he may potentially just try and get some new tyres on that car and absolutely send it for the rest of this race to see if he can catch up to the likes of Whiting, to the back of Catal, to the back of Byram, as he will exit out there in front of Ronald Mathot, you would imagine. As it does look like indeed that is the case. Ivan Bothkamp coming through into turn number 1 when Ronald Mathot is just coming through to finish his 21st lap. As let's take a look now and see what that's going to do. Championship standing wise, I think Cesar Cabral would be taking a convincing lead in the championship over Carlos Catal, but I don't think much is going to change between Catal and Byram. I don't think, obviously the gap will be closer, but I don't think it's going to be by that much. I think it's going to be only a couple points, if any, that swing in the favor of Byram, but he will take any points that he can get ahead of Catal, obviously. Something that he's going to want to absolutely push for. If Byram can potentially get another place off of Moller, then that's going to be obviously a bonus for him, and one that he's going to be very happy with, but has to be aware that that position may also go to Catal. So again, probably not that much difference in terms of championship standings. It does look like Cesar Cabral will be taking the lead of the championship quite convincingly if if the positions end up like they are at the moment. But we do know that Archer does need to pit again, and Cesar Cabral may be able to make it to the end of the race with the incident that he got caught up in lap number 1. But while the action is dying down here a little bit, let's take a look at some of the action here in the race. Obviously, we did have that issue earlier on with the earlier on in turn number 1, as here we are and we see the chaos caused in turn number 1, which took out multiple drivers and caused quite a few incidents between so many championship contenders as well. Carlos Catao picking up front wing damage and having to pit, as well as a couple of other drivers. So when they were all able to pit, we did see a massive amount of people coming in and pitting for damage, pitting for repairs, which then meant that the order was shaken up a little bit. But throughout the race, obviously we've been seeing moves being made by lots and lots of drivers, not necessarily under the safety car, but definitely in green flag conditions, like this move, for example, through the Degners from Cesar Cabral into Degner 1, and that was a move he made on Sean Gerd that caused him to gain a couple of positions. Chris Byram on the same lap through 130R here on Alexander Carver-Robbins to gain his position there, and then Carlos Catao making up positions all on the same lap. So all those 3 drivers all trying to make their way up further into the race, and they were all very much trying to push for more. As we will jump back on board with the live, as James Miller is now pitting, which does mean Cesar Cabral, Chris Byram and Carlos Catao all gain a free position, as well as Corey Whiting and Ivan Bovkamp, which does also mean that Lewis Archer is now probably going to have to look at when does he pit. Obviously, he did have a big gap between himself and Miller, so wherever Miller comes out, you're probably looking at Archer coming out probably around about 15 seconds ahead of. So you'd be looking at sort of getting involved in that battle between Ivan Bovkamp and Lewis Colon. But Archer seems to have had a very untroubled race. Some might even claim boring from his perspective, obviously having no one really to battle with after Whiting pit, seeing as he has just continued to just run laps since then. And after a interesting safety car restart, as here Archer does finally come into the pits, which may mean Cesar Cabral will take the lead of the race. And if he can, in fact it will mean that Cesar Cabral takes the lead of this race, as we will jump on board with Lewis Archer, and in the background we should be able to spot Cesar Cabral coming through, and there he is down the start finish straight. And that does indeed mean that he will not be able to well, that does mean he will have potential pressure from Lewis Archer, as Chris Byram's also going to try and come out here ahead of Lewis, and it does look like they're maybe battling into turn 1, but Chris does just manage to get out in front. So here we go. This is now going to be a battle that everyone's going to be watching with great interest. Lewis Archer, Chris Byram, they've had races before in this league. They've had battles before in this league that have gone right down to the wire, and the GTR Evolution driver of Lewis Archer is going to be looking at a potential old friend right in front of him, an old teammate, if you will, in some circumstance, to see whether or not he can potentially make moves. Obviously not on the same team anymore, so there's going to be a little bit of argy-bargy potentially between the two of them, as Lewis, with the fresher tyres, obviously needs to warm them up a little bit, so he may not be able to make any moves for the first couple of laps, and depending on the DRS situation, he may not be able to make any moves for a while. However, I imagine Lewis has been saving his DRS uses for this very moment, with obviously having no one around him to really need to use the DRS. He may have used it once on that fastest lap, to obviously set it with a 1:45.1, as it looks like a couple of other drivers not really able to get close enough to that fastest lap. Carlos Ghosn with a 1:45.36, and then Cesar Cabral with a 1:45.37. So again, it's looking like Cesar Cabral is going to benefit once again off of a safety car and a win in the Japanese Grand Prix this time. A little bit further from home than the Brazilian Grand Prix, so you know, winning on international soil this time, as Carlos Ghosn does set the fastest lap of the race, 1:44 flat. Potentially a 1:44 in it then for Carlos Ghosn if he can get a little bit of slipstream. But speaking of slipstream, Lewis Archer on those fresh tyres is putting all the pressure on Chris Byram, as it looks like with those fresher tyres he's got so much more grip through the S's, and he can really keep on to the back of Chris Byram, which may mean we may see an overtake from Lewis Archer into onto Chris Byram, going through Spoon Curve on the exit through 130R, and maybe into the Casio Triangle if he's not quite close enough through 130R to make the move. So he's going to be trying to set it up through the hairpin, getting as close as he can in the draft, and it does look like Chris Byram takes quite a deep line into the hairpin, but tries to really get the power down early. But it doesn't look like that seems to have helped, as Lewis Archer's now going to maybe take a look through Spoon Curve. But no, he doesn't yet, but he is just getting himself very large in Chris Byram's mirror and being like, hey buddy, I'm here, did you miss me? And he's going to now try to look down into 130R. That rear wing has indeed, I thought it had closed, but no, that's just the way the car looks. Very difficult to tell whether or not the DRS is open or closed in these cars, because they open up in the, they shut the rear wing to stall the airflow rather than open it and let the airflow drive through the car. So it's a little bit interesting to see how the DRS gets used in these cars and compared to a lot of others. But here we are with Lewis Archer potentially trying to make a move up the inside of Chris Byram, and with the slipstream and in the inside line into turn one, there's not really much you can do to defend it, and that will mean that Lewis Archer has now set himself up to take second place of this race. Going through the S's, Chris Byram's going to try and keep up, but with the fresher tyres, maybe Lewis Archer, it's going to be a big task. But if Lewis Archer can get a good pace under him and he can really start pushing, we may end up seeing Cesar Cabral being pressured by Lewis Archer near the end, which will be something that we need to watch for, especially as back markers and lap traffic all start to play a part in this race later on. But it does look like with those fresher tyres, Lewis was able to pull away from Chris relatively easily, some might say. So obviously the fresher tyres mattering quite a bit, with Chris Byram's tyres being on basically since the start of the race, hitting on the earliest available opportunity after the damage that he had. So Lewis having near enough 22 lap fresher tyres than what Chris was able to have. But that does mean that Carlos Ghosn also has the same amount of tyre wear as Chris, potentially, albeit pitting I think one lap later. So interesting to see whether or not Carlos Ghosn can make any moves on Chris Byram later on in this race, as Lewis Archer is going to get a nice little bit of slipstream here on the back marker. So is going to be able to build that gap on Chris Byram a little bit further, because Chris is going to be a little bit too far back and isn't going to be able to get through the back marker of Sean Gurr just yet, which does mean that potentially a little bit of time loss here from Chris Byram. And if the back marker isn't careful, he may end up having to deal with both Chris Byram and Carlos Ghosn trying to get through him, and which may mean that Chris Byram and Carlos Ghosn are both back together again, as we will jump on board with Chris Byram and see whether or not that back marker does indeed get out of the way into the Degners, as it doesn't look like he is yet. It looks like he's almost trying to race Chris Byram here, but I'd imagine that Chris is going to be very much yelling in the car there about how this back marker should probably be trying to get out the way, as Chris tries to make a move up the inside there of the hairpin. And what I said was true. This back marker has not done any good jobs for for Chris Byram, and does mean that Carlos Catao is now right up in the back of Chris Byram, but may find himself having to deal with the back marker through Spoon Curve, which is not a place you really want to deal with it. Once you've committed to a line through Spoon, you kind of want to stick to it. And Carlos Catao is now going to be trying to make it round the outside of 130R, which I think Sean Gerd should be able to leave that nice and easy for Carlos Catao to get through. But that means the gap now has gotten closer between Chris Byram and Carlos Catao. And I'll tell you what, that gap between Lewis Archer and Cesar Cabral has not dropped that much either. Both drivers setting very fast laps here, as yet more traffic is probably going to mean a little bit of chaos for Chris Byram, and will mean that Carlos Catal's battling is going to put all sorts of pressure on Chris near the end. Obviously 6 laps to go here of this Japanese Grand Prix that has had its fair share of spills and thrills, but mainly through the first couple of laps, with drivers making moves sort of off camera primarily, as we've been focusing on a few other closer battles. And a lot of drivers obviously finding that this circuit is very difficult. It is a very technical circuit as well, so really requires all the attention of the driver to do well around here. So Carlos Catao is now going to try and use all of that driver knowledge. He's going to try and use all of that training that he's been doing to see if he can catch up to the back of Chris Byram and potentially maybe make a move near the end of the race. Obviously don't want to do it too early, because that may give Chris Byram a chance to attack you again. So we may see him hold off a little bit until near the end of the race, if he does get close enough to make a move. Obviously he's still half a tenth off at the moment, sorry, half a second off at the moment. But going through the back straight, both drivers getting a nice little bit of slipstream there as we go into 130R, which does mean that again Carlos Catao using the slipstream very effectively to maybe try and make a move into the Casio triangle. He does look around the outside. Chris Byram defending the inside is going to suffocate his run a little bit as we come out of the Casio triangle. And is Carlos Catao going to try and make the move here through the start-finish straight, as the slipstream is going to prove to be a very effective tool, as he's going to look towards the inside. A little bit of a dummy there, see whether or not Chris Byram reacts, and it doesn't look like he did. Chris sort of knowing he's a little bit too far back and not being fooled there, and just sort of taking his racing line for now and seeing whether or not he can just hold off the pressure. Obviously Chris wants to finish P3, wants to finish on the podium, the last step of the podium, and make sure that Carlos loses as many points to him as he can in the championship fight, because Chris obviously wanting to win the championship, and it looks like the man who's going to end up winning this race, provided there's no issues from Archer late on, who is on a very big tear as well. Lewis Archer setting the fastest lap of the race by a significant margin on everyone else on the field with those fresher tires. So as we do see a little bit of an issue there between Chris Byram. I've always said that he was taking a little bit too much out of the hairpin and was always going a little bit too wide, and that almost allowed Carlos Catao to make a move up the inside, but he thought better of it as we go into Spoon Curve. With the dirty air, Spoon becomes a little bit more of an issue than it normally does, and as well as the off camber, it does mean that yes, you do get the slipstream coming out the back, but Chris probably getting on the throttle a little bit earlier as well means that he can probably defend right up until the Casio triangle. But slipstream is so powerful in these cars that it might not matter, as Carlos Catao's going to look around the outside into the Casio triangle with Chris Byram again defending that inside. Lovely. And Carlos Catao is going to get the better run out of the Casio triangle down here, down the main straight. Chris all the way to the inside, not giving anywhere for Carlos Catao to go, and Chris is going to start to try and maybe squeeze him to the outside of the circuit as we go side by side into turn number 1, and Carlos Catao doesn't make the move. Chris Byram again defending absolutely beautifully, but again through the S's, Chris is going to try and maybe check him up a little bit, it looks like, and try to maybe make sure that he can get a really good run through a couple of these corners. And Carlos is trying to look for any way past, and he's trying to throw everything at him and not able to make anything stick just yet as we exit the S's into Degner 1 and Degner 2. And there is a brave move on here if he wants to send it, and he looked like he was going to, but chose better of it into Degner 1. Degner 2, maybe Chris was a little bit freaked out, makes a mistake, but nope. Chris Byram definitely showing the skill that he has as a driver. But again, locking up into the hairpin, going deep once more, and Carlos Quital able to find more time, which means, again, he's going to have the slipstream up into Spoon. It means that he's going to be able to get close into Spoon, but maybe not make a move, but be close enough to where he can get that big slipstream out of the Spoon corner, down towards 130R, where he could potentially make yet another attempt at a move through the Casio triangle. But as we know, Byram is trying to defend for all his worth, and it is proving to be very effective so far, as it does look like Carlos Quital was going to try and maybe make a move up the inside, but that's going to turn towards the outside of the Casio triangle as he goes again. Tried to go around the outside, not able to make anything of it. Chris Byram very much defending the line. Carlos Quital getting a better run, and it's going to be deja vu of what we saw on the previous lap, but still nothing done yet. Chris Byram again defending the inside very effectively, as both drivers now with DRS closed, and that does mean Carlos Quital with the slipstream is going to be able to get through there on lap number 31, but Chris is not going to be wanting to let that go. Chris is going to want to be pushing as hard as he can to maybe make a move back on to Carlos Quital, and Carlos Quital does now gain third position, again another place on the podium for himself. And the gap here between himself and Lewis Archer is 5 seconds, so unlikely to catch up, and Archer unlikely maybe to catch up to Cesar Cabral unless Cesar has an issue with fuel near the end. But I don't think these drivers will. I think these drivers know this circuit well enough now. They know the car well enough now, having done 3 races so far in this car and probably a lot of practice as well. And they will know how much they need to make to the end. And if Carlos Quital can get another third place here, yes, it's not quite the second, but he did go from last position after the safety car up into third. So again, another comeback drive. It may not have been as impressive as he did in Barcelona, but obviously with the likes of Lewis Archer, Cesar Cabral, Chris Byram all up here fighting for the championship, he's got a lot more competition this time as well, does Carlos Quital, to maybe win a race, as he still hasn't done that yet. 2 second places for him, which puts him second in the championship, and a third place here unless Chris Byram can upset it. And that is exactly what Chris Byram is going to look to do. But speaking of looking at battles that are heating up, Lewis Colon and Ivan Bovkamp are getting quite close together near the end of this race, as it does look like Lewis Colon's going to try and use that slipstream down the back straight into 130R. Is he going to be able to make any moves? He does look to the inside, but doesn't seem to make anything of it just yet. Keeping as tight as he can, and maybe trying to send it around the outside, and it did look like he was almost going to send it, but Ivan Bovkamp covering that off and making sure to tell Lewis, hey mate, you may want to settle a little bit, because I don't want anything to do with that. And it looks like the run out of the chicane wasn't as good as Lewis was expecting, so not too much time to be found there as we go into turn number 1 and then into turn number 2. The double apex right-hander here to start the lap, and then the legendary S's of Suzuka. And once again, this race heats up near the end to have a thriller of a race between multiple drivers in the last couple of laps. We saw it at Brazil, we saw it at Barcelona, we've seen it in just so many places that I cannot believe these drivers even have the ability to put on a show like this. It is incredible that we can go from a race that seemed to be having no action near the middle to all of a sudden, near the end of this race, 2 laps to go, Chris Byram and Carlos Quital battling it out for third place here. The final step of the podium, lap 33, is what Cesar Cabral has now just started. So 2 more laps to go for him. of this Suzuka circuit, the legendary figure 8 track, as it does look like Chris Byram is going to set a new fastest lap of the race for himself, a new personal best, which was a 10th quicker than Carlos Ghosn, so maybe not quite close enough as he would like, but that is going to mean that, again, through the S's, Dirty Air catching up once more, so again, the gap does seem to extend, and it does look like Carlos seems to be able to get that car really turned in through the S's, and compared to a lot of these drivers, like even following through Chris Byram's Dirty Air, he was able to keep really close through the S's section, so maybe the car has a little bit more downforce on it than Chris Byram's, and Chris Byram's is set up more for the straights, which does mean, because there are quite a lot of long straights here, potentially we're going to see him catch up through Spoon and out of the and into 130R, as we see Chris Byram once again having a little bit of an issue with that hairpin. Always a little bit of a wiggle on as he exits the corner, so potentially his tyres are giving up on the rear and are saying enough's enough. I don't want to do any more laps, but the tyres need to hold on for 2 more. And Carlos Ghosn does look like he's building up enough of a gap now as we exit through Spoon Curve, and it's almost out of draft range for Chris Byram, but Chris is just in range, which means he's just going to be able to catch up as we go through 130R. Once again, flat out, nice and easy for these drivers as Cesar Cabral has started the final lap, but it doesn't look like Chris Byram's going to be able to do anything. But here is the other battle that we were looking at, is Lewis Colon and Ivan Bovekamp battling for that 6th position. If Lewis Colon can make this move, we may see him finish where he started the grid, which would be a very good result for him, and Ivan Bovekamp would still be the highest gainer in this race with 8 positions gained. Obviously, Ivan, looking to finish in P6, wants to secure more points for his team, that Cuda Works team, and is going to want to try and take the lead of the Constructors' Championship by more. However, Cesar Cabral with the U-Race Brazil team looking to, as I say, single-man teams, so in terms of the Teams Championship, is looking to be rather competitive with these other teams that do have 2 drivers, with obviously the wins that he's had, and if he gets back-to-back wins here from Brazil and then the Japanese Grand Prix, then he's going to look potentially to take not just the lead of the Drivers' Championship, but the lead of the Constructors by himself as well. But we will all figure that out next time by, as Cesar Cabral is going to be coming through 130R for the final time. In the background there, we did see, who was that? I think that was James Miller. But Cesar Cabral, Casio Triangle, the final chicane to navigate. And Cesar Cabral, the number 13 car, U-Race Brazil, Cesar Cabral will come home to finish the Japanese Grand Prix with a win. Back-to-back races there for Cesar Cabral, winning in Brazil, winning with the fastest lap of the race as well in the Japanese Grand Prix, unless anyone else has anything to say about it. Lewis Archer coming home in 2nd, and then Carlos Ghosn and Chris Byram finishing in 3rd and 4th respectively. Great racing from those 2, but Cesar Cabral once again with the win of the Japanese Grand Prix, and I'm going to admit, that race from him, once again, a safety car masterclass. Again, another strategy that pays off for Cesar Cabral, having a little bit of an incident early on, getting the pit stop out of the way under the safety car, and then just driving solidly until the end. He did get, obviously, a little bit of luck with it, but sometimes that's what you need to win a race here in the iFormula League. But back-to-back races under the races under his belt, both trophies going his way, with Lewis Archer taking home that 2nd place and Carlos Ghosn there in the 3rd. So that is going to hot things up in the championship for sure. But that race at the end there, that was pretty good, I must admit. It was pretty solid there near the end. Getting all those drivers so close together And I'm going to be honest, Cesar Cabral, again, pulls off a win and didn't really look to be in the running until near the end. So, again, the pit stop strategy not really paying off for many other people, but that does mean that we will try and get an interview with our man Cesar Cabral, the race winner here of the Japanese Grand Prix. So let me see. So, let's try and get an interview with him now. Caesar, again, mate, back-to-back wins. Well, yeah. Congratulations, mate. Japanese Grand Prix winner, Brazilian Grand Prix winner, very much in the lead of the championship now. How was that race for you, mate?
I feel relieved after a not so good start. I was feeling like, okay, it's not my day today. But by the hand, for me, this is my favorite track in whole life. If you ask me which track in the world you prefer to race in real life one day, and I would definitely say Suzuka. So I was really happy and excited for this race. And unfortunately for the beginning incident, I were not so happy with. I didn't understand what's happened. I just saw many cars spinning out and then decided to go outside when I saw someone hit me. But again, coincidentally or not, this helped me because, well, I could put enough fuel, not enough fuel, but then I just had to manage my fuel because I stayed behind Ivan. He was quite fast, so then I could manage save some fuel for one lap that I was needing. Otherwise, I have to stop one more time just for a splash. And in general, it was really good. I'm really happy for the result, and yeah, so let's see. Excited for the next race.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, the safety car was actually there was an issue with Chris Byram locked up, I think, under braking for turn number 2 and spun around, which obviously collected quite a few other drivers, Carlos Catal involved, and a couple of other drivers there all involved further down the grid as well. So, again, unfortunate, but the safety car seemed to play in a lot of the favour later on, with the likes of Lewis Archer and James Miller needing to pit near the end. Obviously, you were sitting P3 for a while with those two ahead of you. And then Ivan Bovekamp, again, having to pit, having started from the pit lane as well. So he finished P6 after that, which was obviously mighty impressive. But again, Cabral, back-to-back wins, mate. And let's see if you can do it again into the next one. It's going to be definitely an interesting race, and hopefully we don't get any first lap safety cars.
Yeah, actually, I just will prefer not start from the back next race.
Yeah.
I would prefer just stay a little bit up front to make the stuff a little bit more easier and more competitive. But yeah, I will be excited for the next round.
Well, congratulations, mate, and we'll see you again next week. And yeah, well done once again.
Thank you very much, sir.
Alright, so that was Cesar Cabral. Let's try and get in our third place man, Carlos Catal, in here to see what he has to say after that race. Again, with the safety car incident affecting him relatively badly, but he did manage to obviously get that car back to the pit lane and do a very good recovery drive from the back of the grid to P3. Carlos, mate, how you doing? Again, another back of the grid up into, not P2 this time, but P3. Yeah. But again, on the podium, that makes it every single race so far on the podium. But again, unfortunately, in the incident there at the start of the race, how you feeling?
Yeah, I was just watching the incident back. I mean, it was completely my fault. I generated all of that. I just spun on my own. I had the brake bias too much to the rear, and the track was probably harder than I was expecting. And then I just locked up the rear slightly, started spinning, and I got collected by, I think, Chris, just slightly touched me. And then, yeah, I had damage there. Everybody was crashing into each other because then, you know, chain reaction, everybody starts braking. Probably some other drivers had the bias to the rear as well. They start spinning, and, you know, you saw the rest. And then, I mean, I think, to be fair, even though I was able to benefit from it. I would like to appeal here to the I don't know, to the admins or whoever is in charge. I was able to refuel um, under the safety car to the end. Even though I even caused that, I got damage. A lot of people got damage, and they were able to just stop under yellow and take fuel to the end, because with the max fuel allowed, you're only like 3 or 4 laps short of making the whole race. So if there's a safety car, everybody can pit, and those who maybe like for example, Corey Whiting started on pole, he got the run on me. He had the pace, I think, to win the race, and just because he didn't have to pit under a safety car, he didn't, because and the others who crashed, got damaged and everything, they benefited from the quick repair, and for just the fuel being limited to almost the same amount that you need. So I'd suggest, and I've done it on the Discord, to like limit it to 35 to 40%, and then you'll even have a more interesting possibility for strategy, because some people might do full quali laps and stop twice. Other people might choose to just stop once and save some fuel. I think that'd be more interesting and fair and everything.
Yeah.
That's my ramble for tonight.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's great to hear, obviously, the feedback that the drivers have relating to the race, but obviously, as I say, because what we've seen now is we've seen Cesar Cabral obviously taking the win of 2 races with being involved in safety car incidents and managing to come back and still win the race. Yourself obviously being involved in some incidents and again coming back through the grid, which again, very impressive drive. Coming from so far back and still finishing on the podium is always impressive to see. But yeah, it would be, as I say, nice just to see a couple of the drivers maybe having to make those decisions on whether or not they pit under the safety car as well. Obviously, it is open to the other drivers to pit under safety car with damaged cars, but also the ones who don't potentially could also do the same thing, though a lot of people seem to try and go later into the race. But we do see that
the thing is, sorry to interrupt there, but the thing is, people, I mean, everybody, even Corey, as I mentioned, could have stopped under a safety car without having damaged car. But like this, like everyone will, the first safety car will, which almost always happens, will be neutralized if the fuel is limited to 35%. Because of that, like, I'm just watching here actually on the replay, Chris driving with a completely like 180 degrees steering wheel, and he still was fighting for me for a podium. I mean, if we want to go for realism, that never never happens. So I would also vote to remove the quick repair on that. But I'm totally fine with just the fuel. You know, I think the fuel would add much more interest to the strategy, and any safety car that comes out like this doesn't just make it like, oh, I'm gonna stop, I just need to save fuel, and I'm gonna, with this stop, I can make it to the end with whatever. There's always one safety car, so yeah, you can always do that. So like the safety car means nothing, you know, everybody's just gonna stop. It's not interesting, you know.
Well, it's all things that I'm sure the organisers will be looking for and looking to try and maybe change to spice things up in the championship. But hey, as for now though, that does put you a little bit ahead of Chris Byram in the championship. But obviously with Cesar Cabral winning, that's pulled the gap out a little bit. So hopefully you two can get some very good racing near the end. Through the next couple of rounds, and hopefully the safety cars aren't as prevalent in the next couple of rounds as well, so hopefully that means that you guys can get some really nice wheel-to-wheel action for the entire race. Would also be interesting for myself to see if my voice could last through that.
Maybe I'll get someone to help you there. I think I'm gonna be helping Weston or Alex tomorrow for F3, so maybe you'll have one of them join you for the F2 races.
Well, would be awesome to see, obviously, but hey, I mean, as we say, this race once again was a little bit of a slower race this time than it seemed in the others, but P3 again for yourself. So congratulations, and yeah, hope you have a good rest of the day, rest of the evening.
Thank you. Thank you. You
See you
too.
later, mate.
Yeah.
And that is all from us here in the iFormula League for the Formula 2. Obviously, tomorrow we do have F3 and we do have F1 here from Suzuka. And your race results have been on the screen during these interviews. So I hope you've all had the time to process that. Unfortunately, no interviews from Lewis Archer, but we will see if we can get him in next week if he's on the podium as well. But any information you need, double check the website www.iformulaleague.com. Get yourself involved in the YouTube chat, get yourself involved in the Discord as well. And yeah, I mean, this race again a little bit slower in the middle, but definitely made up for it near the end. And once again, my voice is dying, so I will see you guys next week. I believe we're racing at Imola next week, so should be a very interesting race there with the chicane in the middle. Because I still don't think iRacing have rescanned that yet. So that should make these cars quite interesting, see how many of them try to use as much of the curbs as possible. But that'll be it for tonight. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all next week.